Do not attempt to sweeten truth with honey. Speak plainly, and I will deal honestly. Flatter, and you fail.
For the good of...
What I'm about to say isn't meant to stop you returning home. As far as I care, you can go wherever you wish. But I want you to know how you have behaved towards me, and how I have treated you. I'll begin, as is right, with my father, Philip. When he found you, you were mere peasants, wearing hides, tending a few sheep on the mountain slopes, and you could barely defend them from your neighbors. Under him, you began living in cities, with good laws and customs, and he turned you from slaves into rulers over those very barbarians who used to plunder your land. He conquered most of Thrace, taking the best harbors so there was trade and prosperity, and put the mines to steady work. The Thessalians, they used to terrify you. Well, we rule them now. The Athenians and Thebans, always looking for a chance to attack Macedonia, were so humbled, myself playing my small part in the war, that they no longer take tribute from Macedonia, but instead depend upon us for their protection. My father went to the Peloponnese and put their house in order. Then he was declared supreme commander of all the Greeks for the campaign against the Persians, an honor not just for himself, but for all Macedonians. This is what my father Philip did for you.
Welcome, welcome.
Great enough on its own,
I will give it.
but small compared to what you've gained from me. I crossed the Hellespont, even though back then the Persians still commanded the sea. I defeated the satraps of the great King Darius, and made you rulers of Ionia, Aeolis, Phrygia, and Lydia, and took Miletus by siege.
My judgment.
The rest of the land surrendered willingly, and their wealth became yours. All the riches of Egypt and Cyrene, which I won without a fight, are yours now. Syria, Palestine, Mesopotamia, Babylonia, all belong to you. The wealth of Lydia, the treasures of Persia, the jewels of India and the outer sea. You are now satraps. You are generals and captains. What have I held back for myself apart from this purple cloak and diadem? Nothing. No man can point to my riches, only the things I hold in trust for you all. And what would I do with them anyway? I eat what you eat. I get no more rest than you. Many times I have spent the night on watch so that you could sleep soundly. Who among you believes he's worked harder for me than I have for him? Come on. If you've got scars, strip and show them to me. I'll show you mine. There isn't one part of my body, the front at least, that doesn't bear a wound. My body's covered in scars from every weapon you can think of. Swords, arrows, stones, clubs. All for the sake of your lives, your glory, and your wealth. And yet here I still am, leading you, as conqueror of land and sea, rivers, mountains, and the plains. We've celebrated our weddings together. Many of your children will be cousins of my own. I've paid off your debts without asking how you got them, even though you're paid well enough and pillage every city we take. Many of you wear golden crowns, badges of courage and honor given you by me. Any one of us who was killed, who met a glorious end, we buried with full honors. Many now stand immortalized by bronze statues in Macedonia. Their families are honored and pay no taxes. Under my command, not one man has been killed fleeing the enemy. And now I wanted to send back some of you who've been wounded or crippled, or have grown old, to be welcomed back home as heroes. But since you all wish to go, then all of you, go! Go home and tell them that your king, Alexander, conqueror of the Persians, Medes, Bactrians, and Scythians, who now rules over the Parthians, Chorasmians, and Hyrcanians as far as the Caspian Sea, who's marched over the mountains of the Hindu Kush, crossed the Oxus and Tanais rivers, even the Indus, first to cross it since Dionysus himself. I would have crossed the Hyphasis too if you hadn't cowered in fear. Who sailed into the Great Sea from the mouth of the Indus. Who crossed the desert of Gedrosia, where no one had ever led an army. Who took Carmenia, while my fleet sailed the Persian Gulf. When you get home, you tell them that when you made it back to Susa, you abandoned him and went home, leaving him under the protection of the foreigners you'd conquered. Perhaps this report of yours will seem glorious in the eyes of men, and worthy in the eyes of the gods. Be gone!
Thank you to all the Patreon supporters who helped create this video. If you'd like exclusive early access to videos like this, and the chance to vote on future topics, please visit the Epic History TV Patreon page.
Y el cuerpo siento cansado, fumando voy relajado y la fiesta no va a parar. Supreme la ropita y la clica no se me agüita, las onzas se...
You're such a fucking hoe, I love it. I know you like it more, I love it. Fuck you.
I'm a professional MMA fighter with a record of 4-1. I'm an up-and-coming fighter, and
I'm in love with the coco. I'm in love with the coco. I got it for the Lolo. I'm in love with the coco. I'm in love with the coco. I'm in love with the coco. I got it for the Lolo. Turn up. I'm in love with the coco. Hit my plug, that's my cholo. Cause he got it for the Lolo. If you snitching, I go loco. Hit you with that 38. Niggas thinking that I'm solo. 50 deep, they like, oh no. No, please no. Heard the fans taking photos. I know nothing but the popo. Baking soda, I got baking soda. Baking soda, I got baking soda. Whip it through the glass, nigga. I'm blowing money fast, nigga. I'm in love with the coco. I'm in love with the
Connor, I know
coco.
the media has a ton of questions.
The
I got it
reaction
for the
that's happened
Lolo.
online is bigger than it ever planned before.
I'm in love with the coco. I'm in love with the
If
coco.
this is your last media obligation,
I'm
you have
in love with the coco. I got it for the
people
Lolo.
criticize King Diaz for leaving the press
I'm in love with the coco.
Clean, it must be good service. Let's-
me is like
let's
my
talk-
mom.
let's talk
Are so
And then she does clean work on my girlfriend, and she does clean work on my sister, and then
you have a girlfriend.
36, that's a kilo. Need a brick, miss my free throw. I'm in love, just like Neo. Busting shots, now he Neo. Free my homies, fuck the deal. Fuck the drugs, fuck my peel. All this talk like a Nino. Water whip like a Nemo. Baking soda, I got baking soda. Baking soda, I got baking soda. Whip it through the glass, nigga. I'm blowing my face, nigga. I'm in love with the coco. I'm in love with the coco. I got it for the Lolo. I'm in love with the coco. I'm in love with the coco. I'm in love with the coco. I got it for the Lolo.
What the fuck is wrong with him?
I'm in love with the coco.
And so you outline, and I mean, I am pessimistic about this in my approach in some sense, because when I'm talking to my audiences, and the same thing happens in my book, Maps of Meaning, and in 12 Rules for Life, I'm laying out the worst case scenario. And that's sort of like hell. It's things are going really badly for you. And that, there's just chance associated with that sometimes. And you and the people around you are doing stupid things to make it worse. It's like, okay, what have you got under those circumstances? You've got the possibility to slowly raise yourself out of the mire. You've got the possibility to do just what the fighter does when he's defeated, which is to say, well, regardless of the circumstances that might have led to my defeat, like even if there were errors on the part of the referee, this is no time to whine about it. This is a time to take stock of what I did wrong so that I can improve it into the future. And that's the right attitude. So because people have commented on every verse in the Bible, like to a degree that's almost unimaginable. So you can look and see all the interpretations and all the translations and get some sense of what the genuine meaning might be. And the line, the meek shall inherit the earth, meek is not a good translation, or the word has moved in the 300 years or so since it was translated. What it means is this: those who have swords and know how to use them, but keep them sheathed, will inherit the world. And that's another thing I've been telling. Yeah, no kidding. That's a lot different, man. That's a big difference. It's so great. And so, like, one of the things I tell young men, well, and young women as well, but the young men really need to hear this more, I think, is that you should be a monster. You know, because everyone says, well, you should be harmless, virtuous. You shouldn't do anyone any harm. You should sheath your competitive instinct. You shouldn't try to win. You know, you don't want to be too aggressive. You don't want to be too assertive. You want to take a back seat and all of that. It's like, no. Wrong. You should be a monster, an absolute monster, and then you should learn how to control it.
Do you know the expression, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war?
Right, exactly. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly right. And so when I tell young men that, they think, well, lots of them are competitive. They're low in agreeableness, you know, because that's part of being competitive temperamentally. It's like, is there something wrong with being competitive? There's nothing wrong with it. There's something wrong with cheating. There's something wrong with being a tyrant. There's something wrong with winning unfairly. All of those things are bad. But you don't want people to win? What's the difference between trying to win and striving? You want to eradicate striving?
What's the uncomfortable?
Actually want something, you can have it. You have to treat yourself like you matter, because if you don't, then you don't take care of yourself, and you become vengeful and cruel, and you take it out on people around you, and you're not a positive force. None of that's good. So you suffer more, and so does everyone around you. And there's a malevolence that enters into it. None of that's good. So that's what happens if you don't treat yourself like you matter. The first thing I would say is, well, you should be afraid of taking risks and pursuing something meaningful. One of the main reasons that people don't get what they want is because they don't actually figure out what it is. And the probability that you're going to get what would be good for you, let's say, which would even be better than what you want, right? Because, you might be wrong about what you want easily. But maybe you could get what would really be good for you. Well, why don't you? Well, because you don't try. Life is a challenge that, in some sense, can't be surmounted. So there's no way out of your problem. But there are certainly proper ways of dealing with it.
Yeah.
Sit on your bed one day and ask yourself, what remarkably stupid things am I doing on a regular basis to absolutely screw up my life? I would say that the goal in life is to conduct yourself so that life improves. You should be more afraid of staying where you are if it's making you miserable. Clock is ticking.
Yeah,
and if you're miserable in your job now and you change nothing, in 5 years you'll be much more miserable and you'll be a lot older. People don't get what they want and they need because they don't aim at it. And it's a hard lesson for people to learn because they're cynical to begin with and they presume that there's no possible way of moving forward. But it's not so unreasonable to assume that you're not going to hit what you don't aim at, or you're not going to hit what you aim at and don't shoot at. We're built to contend with the world. We're built to contend with reality. You want a challenge, and the best way that you can take on a challenge, because a challenge fortifies you. So you don't want to be secure, you want to be strong. And you get strong by taking on optimal challenges. And so you lay out your destiny in the world, and you take the slings and arrows of fate, and you make yourself stronger while you're doing so. And you might fail, and fortune might do you in, but it's your best bet.
Huge part of the reason that people fail is because they don't ever set up the criteria for success. And so, since success is a very narrow line and very unlikely, the probability that you're going to stumble on it randomly is zero. So you want to set yourself a task that's difficult, but not so difficult you can't attain it. And then what happens is that you step up improvement across time, incrementally. And there's also a certain element of humility to it, right? Which is, don't bite off more than you can chew, right? Don't set grandiose goals, but incremental improvement will get you a tremendous distance. It's a luxury to pursue what makes you happy. It's a moral obligation to pursue what you find meaningful. And that doesn't mean it's easy. It might require sacrifice. If you need to change your job too, let's say you have a family and children and a mortgage, you have responsibilities. You've already picked up those responsibilities. You don't just get to walk away scot-free and say, well, I don't like my job, I quit. That's no strategy. But what you might have to do is you think, well, this job is killing my soul. All right, so what do I have to do about that? Well, I have to look for another job. Well, no one wants to hire me. It's like, okay, maybe you need to educate yourself more. Maybe you need to update your curriculum vitae, your resume. Maybe you need to overcome your fear of being interviewed. I think what you have to do, and this is part of humility, is you have to look around you within your sphere of influence, like the direct sphere of influence, and fix the things that announce themselves as in need of repair. And those are often small things, and they can be like your room. Put it in order, because the thing is, it isn't exactly so important that your room is in order, although it is. What's important is that you learn how to distinguish between chaos and order, and to be able to act in a manner that produces order. 3 years from now, you can have what you need. You got to be careful about it. You can't have everything. You can have what would be good for you, but you have to figure out what it is, and then you have to aim at it. And when you're in the zone, you're expanding your skills in a manner that's intrinsically rewarding because you're succeeding. And so you want to set, if you're good to yourself, you think, okay, I need to set a goal, but I need to set a goal that someone as stupid and useless as me could probably attain if they put some effort into it. Now, if there are things about your life that are bothering you, or things about the world that are bothering you, then you want to decompose them into solvable sub-problems. You can do something as simple as just sit on your bed and think, okay, there's probably like 5 things I could do today so that tomorrow morning is slightly better than this morning was, at least I'm not falling behind. And those will usually be, it's like having to eat a toad in the morning, right? It's like, it's not going to be something you want to do. There'll be things you're trying to avoid. They're snakes, essentially. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. I've dealt with hundreds of people in my clinical and consulting practice, and we set a goal, we develop a vision, and work towards it, and things inevitably get better for people. So it's not a luxury, it's difficult. It's a moral responsibility, and it isn't happiness. It's not, the pursuit isn't for happiness. Well, greatness is what reveals itself when you attempt to formulate, when you attempt to carefully articulate and live out what you believe to be true. It just happens, because there isn't anything more powerful than truth, right? That's the antidote to suffering, truth. If you ask yourself, instead of telling yourself, what is it that I could do to set things more right today that I would actually do? It's usually some small thing because you're not that disciplined, Then you can go do it. Lay a disciplinary structure on yourself. Get the chaos in check, and then you can move towards a state that's freer. Well, what happens if you don't treat other people like they matter? Well, you lie to them, you cheat them, you steal, you enter into impulsive relationships with them. They can't trust you. That doesn't go anywhere. They don't like you. You end up alone at best, and maybe like incarcerated at worst. Like, that doesn't work. And so you watch the people around you who thrive, regardless of what they say. They act out the proposition that everyone matters. If you're hungry and you eat, well, that's good, but it's over, and then you're on to the next thing, right? It's not exactly sustaining, it's just necessary. That's called consummatory reward, by the way. This other reward system is incentive reward, and the incentive reward system works on dopamine, this neurochemical dopamine, which is also the neurochemical tracks that opiates and cocaine and amphetamines, the drugs that people really like to abuse, alcohol often for some people, activate. And so you might say if you don't have enough meaning in your life, then you're more prone to addiction. And that's definitely the case, even with rats. If you take a rat and you put him in a cage by himself and he has nothing to do, and then you give him access to cocaine, he'll get addicted to the point where he won't do anything but take cocaine. But if you throw the rat back in with a bunch of other rats and he gets to do rat things, then it's very hard to get him addicted to cocaine. And so the purposeless rat is prone to addiction. Well, it's the same with human beings. Kind of have this idea that you have a certain delightful, wonderful, positive freedom as a child, and then that's given up as you approach adulthood. But the truth of the matter is that you have a lot of potential as a child, but none of that is capable of manifesting itself as freedom before you become disciplined. And discipline is a matter of the imposition of order, and the order is necessary, especially for people who are hopeless and nihilistic. And lots of people are hopeless and nihilistic, way more people than you think. And part of that is because no one's ever really encouraged them. The magnitude of the reward you experience as you're moving towards a goal is proportionate to the importance of the goal. So that means the more important the goal you pick, the more possibility there is for the kind of reward, let's say, it's really a state of being that is life-affirming. And it is directly life-affirming in that, like if you're in a football game and it's an important football game and maybe you break a finger, and normally that's a problem. It hurts, and you're going to stop doing whatever you're doing. But if you're right in the middle of the game, then you'll be so amped up on this reward system that it's analgesic. It stops the pain. It also suppresses anxiety.
The gods weep when men battle fruitlessly.
People have extracted unbelievable successes out of catastrophic failures. And I'm not saying that in a naive way. I know perfectly well what happens to people. You're doing fine in life and then you get cancer, and then 6 months later you're dead. And all the heroism in the world isn't going to save you at that point. But that's not the point. That's not the point. Life is bounded by mortality, but that doesn't mean that you don't get out there and contend, and you develop by contending, and you minimize the net amount of suffering in the world. And that's something, man. That's something to do. so because people have commented on every verse in the Bible, like to a degree that's almost unimaginable. So you can look and see all the interpretations and all the translations and get some sense of what the genuine meaning might be. And the line, "the meek shall inherit the earth," meek is not a good translation, or the word has moved in the 300 years or so since it was translated. What it means is this: those who have swords and know how to use them, but keep them sheathed, will inherit the world. And that's another thing I've been telling. Yeah, no kidding. That's a lot different, man. That's a big difference. It's so great. And so, like, one of the things I tell young men, well, and young women as well, but the young men really need to hear this more, I think, is that you should be a monster. You know, because everyone says, well, you should be harmless, virtuous. You shouldn't do anyone any harm. You should sheath your competitive instinct. You shouldn't try to win. You know, you don't want to be too aggressive. You don't want to be too assertive. You want to take a back seat and all of that. It's like, no. Wrong. You should be a monster, an absolute monster, and then you should learn how to control it.
Do you know the expression, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war?
Right, exactly. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly right. And so when I tell young men that, they think, well, lots of them are competitive. They're low in agreeableness, you know, because that's part of being competitive temperamentally. It's like, is there something wrong with being competitive? There's nothing wrong with it. There's something wrong with cheating. There's something wrong with being a tyrant. There's something wrong with winning unfairly. All of those things are bad. But you don't want people to win? What's the difference between trying to win and striving? You want to eradicate striving?
Well, it's the uncomfortable.
And so you outline, and I mean, I am pessimistic about this in my approach in some sense, because when I'm talking to my audiences, and the same thing happened in my book, Maps of Meaning, and in 12 Rules for Life, I'm laying out the worst case scenario. And that's sort of like hell. It's things are going really badly for you. And that there's just chance associated with that sometimes. And you and the people around you are doing stupid things to make it worse. It's like, okay, what have you got under those circumstances? You've got the possibility to slowly raise yourself out of the mire. You've got the possibility to do just what the fighter does when he's defeated, which is to say, well, regardless of the circumstances that might have led to my defeat, like even if there were errors on the part of the referee, this is no time to whine about it. This is a time to take stock of what I did wrong so that I could improve it into the future. And that's the right attitude.
Woods, pretty face, but I'm known for hitting chugs. Got him like, too good. To the yard, he ain't never leave his pretty on God. Bro, too good. Real boss, keep me got the Woods, pretty face, but I'm known for hitting chugs. Got him like, too good. To the yard, he ain't never leave his pretty on God. Bro, too good. Real boss, keep me got the hood. Real boss, keep me got the hood.
Where did the Persian immortals from 300 come from? They are believed to have originated as a bodyguard unit of Cyrus the Great, which eventually formed the core of the Achaemenid standing army, and whose ranks were reportedly never allowed to drop under 10,000. They bore tall shields, scaled armor, large bows, and distinctive spears with pomegranate designs. In battle, it seems they fought where the action was expected to be the fiercest. Here is one of our only descriptions of this unit in action, where Mardonius was himself riding a white horse in the battle and surrounded by 1,000 picked men who were the flower of the Persians. There, they pressed their adversaries hardest. So long as the general was alive, the Persians stood their ground and defended themselves, overthrowing many Spartans. In commemoration of their great legacy, the 1942 Iranian army even created its own immortal guard.
We fight them! Every nobleman who had a will to fight was at that meeting! We cannot beat an army! With the 50 farmers we can raise!
And we do not have to beat them. Just fight them.
Your father was a fighter!
I know who my father was. I came back home to raise crops and, God willing, a family. If I can live in peace, I will. I love you. Always have. I want to marry you.
Assault on the king's soldiers.
Meet me at the grove. Right!
They're getting away! Is the same as an assault on the king himself.
Move!
Go home.
We'll have no homes left when the English garrison from the castle comes through and burns us out. And they will.
I'm William Wallace. Go back to England and tell them there that Scotland's daughters and her sons are yours no more. Tell them Scotland is free.
A rebellion has begun.
Under whom?
A commoner named William Wallace.
Blood is spread, and the Highlanders are coming down on their own.
Aye, in droves of hundreds and thousands.
If I risk my neck for you, will I get a chance to kill Englishmen? Hold!
Who's with me?
I am Wallace. Are you ready for a war?
Here are Scotland's terms. Lower your flags and march straight back to England, stopping at every home you pass by, to beg forgiveness for 100 years of theft, rape, and murder.
Sons of Scotland! I am William Wallace. And I see a whole army of my countrymen here in defiance of tyranny. You've come to fight as free men. Free men you are. What will you do with that freedom? Will you fight? Fight? Against that? No! We will run! And we will live. Aye? Fight and you may die. Run. You'll live. At least a while. And dying in your beds, many years from now, would you be willing to train all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
This Wallace is a brigand, nothing more.
Wallace has already killed the magistrate and taken control of the town.
This Wallace, he doesn't even have a knighthood, but he fights with passion and he inspires.
William Wallace killed 50 men.
100 men with his own sword. Cut through them like
Moses through the Red Sea.
Sir William, in the name of God, we declare and appoint thee guardian and high protector of Scotland, and thy captains as aide-de-camp. Stand and be recognised.
We have beaten the English, but they'll come back. Because you won't stand together. You're so concerned with squabbling for the scraps from Longshank's table that you've missed your God-given right to something better. There's a difference between us. You think the people of this country exist to provide you with position. I think your position exists to provide those people with freedom. And I go to make sure that they have it. You tell your king that William Wallace will not be ruled, and nor will any Scot while I live. Now is our chance, now. If we join, we can win. If we win, well then we'll have what none of us have ever had before. Country of our own. You're the rightful leader, and there is strength in you, I see it.
If you make enemies on both sides of the border, you'll end up dead.
We all end up dead. It's just a question of how and why.
I'm not a coward. I want what you want, but we need the nobles.
We need them. Now tell me, what does that mean to be noble? Your title gives you claim to the throne of our country, but men don't follow titles. But they follow courage.
Men fight for me, because if they do not, I throw them off my land and I starve their wives and their children. Those men who bled the ground red at Falkirk. They fought for William Wallace, and he fights for something that I've never had. And I took it from him when I betrayed him, and I saw it in his face on the battlefield. And it's tearing me apart.
All men betray.
Go!
Or lose heart.
I don't want to lose heart! I want to believe. As he does. I will never be on the wrong side again.
demon bastards! You couldn't agree on the colour of shite! It's a trap, are you blind?
Joining the nobles is the only hope for our people.
I don't want to be a martyr.
Nor I. I want to live. I want a home and children and peace.
Do you?
I do. I've asked God for those things. It's all for nothing if you don't have freedom.
Give me the strength to die well.
Your heart is free. Have the courage to follow it.
William Wallace, you stand in taint of high treason.
Against whom?
Against your king. Have you anything to say?
Never in my whole life did I swear allegiance to him.
I come to beg you to confess all and swear allegiance to the king that he might show you mercy.
Will you show mercy to my country?
Rope! Confess and you may receive a quick death.
Perhaps even live in a tower. In time, who knows what can happen?
Aye, and you must be purified by pain.
If you can only live.
Do you confess?
If I swear to him, then all that I am is dead already.
We'll die, it will be over.
Every man dies. Not every man really lives.
Just say it. Cry out. Mercy.
Mercy, God.
Mercy. Just say it.
People know you. Noble and common, they respect you. And if you would just lead them to freedom, they'd follow you.
Unite us. Unite us.
You have bled with Wallace! Now bleed with me!
In the year of our Lord, 1314, patriots of Scotland, starving and outnumbered, charged the fields of Bannockburn. They fought like warrior poets. They fought like Scotsmen, and won their freedom.
Got the baddest bitch in my town. I had her jumping like a countdown. I told her look at all this money, wow, she's so thick, so I hit her with a bust down. I been making all this money, heart-shaped kisses, little sand for the tummy. Hostile bitch, yeah, mouth always running. Hit her with the jawbreaker head and Nettie. Ha. Now that's kinda funny. Hottest out the whip like a Playboy bunny. Hottest in the biz with an 808's crunchy. And I think I heard a snip, man, that boy's nose running. Goddamn, yeah, I sound something like a man. Came in with the hits, I'm the highest in the man. And I know y'all kinda pissed cause you know I'll never land. They call me Peter Pan cause I'm high, never land. Goddamn, slow down for me now, wait. Slow down for the crowd, wait. Slow down for me now. Drop that shit, let it motherfucking bounce. Wait, slow down for me now. Wait, slow down for the crowd. Wait, slow down for me now. Drop that shit, let it motherfucking bounce. I got the baddest bitch in my town. I had her jumping like a countdown. I told her look at all this money, wow, she's so thick, so I hit her with a bust down. I just sold my soul, feeling ludicrous with the blueberry roll. If you want a feature, you can come pay the toll. Stop right there, think I'm already sold. I sell out like a top hit, bass keep bumming like the crowd with a mosh pit. So many bitches need to tell them all to stop it. Only so much room up here in the cockpit.
Be welcome, I suppose. Now speak as you will, and try to be interested.
Greetings from the Erie Coast. This is Mad Shad. Freya Vigi, may Freya bless on this beautiful Friday. Oh man, it's 80-something degrees.
We have good reason to accept such
tell you who's not having a beautiful
My
day.
people will give thanks.
Those Americans still trapped in Afghanistan, left there by Trader Joe and his malicious / incompetent regime. Yeah, those guys. And of course, least we forget, the 13 servicemen and women died, along with 200 other individuals at Abbey Gate by a suicide bomber. I can't talk today. By a suicide bomber in Kabul, Afghanistan, of August of last year. Every day, never forget. There's hope. Folks trying to get him out. Task Force Argo, Task Force Pineapple, Project Exodus, Project Dynamo, Christian Coalition, just to name a few. Meanwhile, where do I begin? Shit. It seems like Potato is going over to Israel and making power moves with the Palestinians.
These people are
he's talking out both sides of his mouth there.
Will you not move your
says,
armies
yeah, we
against
pledge
them? When can you give the
our
orders?
allegiance and support with Israel against Iran, but on the same token, we're going to give millions of dollars to the Palestinian state and going to try to start an embassy in Israel, a Palestinian embassy in Israel. What the fuck? Do you know how dangerous that is? That's, man. Palestinian, the PLO is Iran. It not only is it Iran, it's the whole axis of evil that's against Israel. I mean, you're basically just giving them you're letting them stay rent free in your fortification. Please come on in, do as much terror as you want. Yeah, that's what's going to happen. So yeah, it's just one of the things I remember. Yeah. So this has been Mad Shad. Every day, never forget.
Parece que hoy me gustas un poco más.
Okay.
Hola, ¿cómo tal? So nice to meet you. You said we should go and get a room.
So you admit it's too hot and you can't finish it. You admit it.
I'm not sick.
You admit defeat. You admit it's too hot for you.
I admit I'm not hungry anymore.
You want to tell Joe Biden right now?
A, B, C, D, E, for you and your mom and your sister and your job and your broke ass car and that shit you call or for you and your friends that I'll never see again. Everybody but your dog you can more fuck up. Na 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 na. A, B, C, D, E, for you.
I used to joke around. I can't even joke no more. I used to play with racism. You can't even play with racism no more. You can't even play. I used to go to the dog park and pretend I lost my dog. And I have white people help me look for him. I'm like, his name, nigga.
I speak for the Senate and all Rome.
Like, nigga!
You should carefully consider this offer.
You don't like dogs? I mean, it's the nigga! Nigga, please!
You're exciting, boy, come find me. Psych!
I know you guys like watching my B-double-O-T-Y. So here it is.
LA is special because I have an objective tonight. I came here tonight because this body of work that I've done on Netflix, I'm going to complete. All the questions you might have had about all these jokes I've said in the last few years, I hope to answer tonight. I'd like to start by addressing the LBGTQ community directly. And I want every member of that community to know that I come here tonight in peace. And I hope to negotiate the release of the baby. Sad, sad, sad story. The baby was the #1 streaming artist until about a couple weeks ago. He took a nasty spill on stage and said some wild stuff about the LGBTQ community during a concert in Florida. Now, you know I go hard in the paint, but even I saw that shit and was like, God damn, the baby. Ooh, he pushed the button, didn't he? He pushed the button, punched the LGBTQ community right in the AIDS. Can't do that. Can't do that. But I do believe, and I'll make this point later, that the kid made a very egregious mistake. I will acknowledge that. But, you know, a lot of the LGBTQ community doesn't know the baby's history. He's a wild guy. He once shot a nigga and killed him in Walmart. Oh, this is true. Google it. The baby shot and killed a nigga in Walmart in North Carolina. Nothing bad happened to his career. Do you see where I'm going with this? In our country, you can shoot and kill a nigga, but you better not hurt a gay person's feelings. And this is precisely the disparity that I wish to discuss. I have a question for the audience. And this is a real question. I'm not joking around. Is it possible that a gay person can be racist? Do you really think so? Of course it's possible. Look at Mike Pence. Who I'm guessing, but I bet you he's gay. And he's not Pride Parade gay
We would be
either.
forever in your debt if you
He's sad gay.
Are these words
Feel
from
bad
a
for him.
sober tongue? If
He looks
so,
like one of
then I
them
must
gays
accept
that
them.
prays about it.
I hope that this offer of kindness will be taken in the right
Jesus,
spirit
please
of
take these dirty feelings out of my heart.
Your lack of acceptance
Please,
is
Jesus,
disappointing.
make these buttholes ugly to me.
Will not hear the prayers
I want to keep on tasting these dicks. You guys are confusing the emotions. You think I hate gay people, and what you're really seeing is that I am jealous of gay people. Oh, I'm jealous. I'm not the only black person that feels this way. We blacks, we look at the gay community and we go, God damn it, look how well that movement is going. Look how well you are doing. And we've been trapped in this predicament for hundreds of years. How the fuck are you making that kind of progress? I can't help but feel like if slaves had baby oil and booty shorts, we might have been free 100 years sooner, you know what I mean? If Martin Luther King was like, I want everybody to get up on them floats, get your bodies good and shiny. I don't hate gay people at all. I respect the shit out of you. Well, not all of you. I'm not that fond of these newer gays. Too sensitive. Too brittle. Those aren't the gays I grew up with. I miss them old school gays, nigga. Them Stonewall niggas. Them the ones that I respect. They didn't take shit from anybody. They fought for their freedom. I respect that shit. I'm not even gay. And I want to be like a Stonewall nigga. Them old school gangster gays. Them glory hole niggas. Them the ones I like. These new gays don't even know what the glory hole is. It's a hole in the wall the gay contractors built. You wanna know why they put that hole in the wall? I'll tell you, and there's no nice way to say it. Because when they wanna have some fun, they will put their penises in that hole and hope for the best. I respect that shit. There's a lot of courage on both sides of that hole, nigga. I'm not even gay, and I want to try that glory hole out. What if Martin Luther King had to integrate the glory hole? I don't care if it's black lips back there or white lips back there. A mouth is a mouth. A warm, wet mouth. I'm going all the way.
Warning. You're not going to like what you're about to hear.
You know you're saved because the Spirit bears witness that you are born again, because your life has changed and is changing and continues in a process of change, and when it stalls in that process,
Jesus did address homosexuality. He addressed it in Matthew chapter 5 and in Matthew chapter 19. Because in Matthew chapter 5 and Matthew chapter 19, he addressed the issue of marriage. He rooted his understanding of marriage in the teaching in Genesis chapter 2. The teaching in Genesis chapter 2 that gave us marriage between a man and a woman for the purposes of procreation, illustration, and sanctification. he also made it very clear that what God has joined together, man cannot separate. In other words, God is the author of marriage, not man. Therefore, God is the one who defines marriage, not man. Therefore, man does not have the right to introduce the concept of same-sex marriage. Number one, because by definition, it's not marriage, it's another thing. And number two, because by definition, it goes against what was created in Genesis chapter 2. So Jesus did address homosexuality.
As life moves forward, we realize that excitement isn't just for the young. That old dogs can learn new tricks. And that it's okay if life gets a little easier. We understand that life may look a little different, yet we believe friendships and memories are still to be made. So to those who say the best days are in the
Will you
past,
and idle?
we beg to
Do
differ.
these insolent
As
dogs
seasons
serve
change,
nothing in your
we'll
bellies?
be here.
Are you turned into women?
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
Now, Bruce, just look right into the camera lens right here and tell us your name, your age, and where you were born.
My last name is Lee, Bruce Lee. I was born in San Francisco in 1940. I'm 24 right now.
And you worked in motion pictures in Hong Kong?
Yes, since I was around 6 years old.
And when did you leave Hong Kong?
1959, when I was 18.
I see. Now look over to me, Bruce, as we talk. I understand you just had a baby boy?
Yeah,
And you've lost a little sleep over it, have you?
3 nights.
And tell the crew what time they shoot the pictures in Hong Kong.
Well, it's mostly in the morning because it's kind of noisy in Hong Kong, you know, around 3 million people there. And so every time when you have picture, it's mostly, say, around 12 a.m. to 5 a.m. in the morning.
I see. They'd love that there. And you went to college in the United States?
Yes,
And what did you study?
philosophy.
I see. Now, you told me earlier today that karate and jiu-jitsu are not the most powerful of the best forms of Oriental fighting. What is the most powerful of the best form?
Well, it's bad to say the best, but in my opinion, I think Kung Fu is pretty good.
Would you tell us a little bit about Kung Fu?
Well, Kung Fu is originated in China. It is the ancestor of karate and jiu-jitsu. It's more of a complete system and it's more fluid. By that I mean it's more flowing. There is continuity in movement instead of one movement, two movement, and then stop.
Would you look right into the camera lens and explain the principle of a glass of water as it applies to Kung Fu?
Well, Kung Fu, the best example would be a glass of water. Why? Because water is the softest substance in the world, but yet it can penetrate the hardest rock or anything, granite, you name it. Water also is insubstantial. By that I mean you cannot grasp hold of it. You cannot punch it and hurt it. So every Kung Fu man is trying to do that, to be soft like water and flexible and adapt itself to the opponent.
I see. What's the difference between a Kung Fu punch and a karate punch?
Well, the karate punch is like an iron bar, whack. A Kung Fu punch is like an iron chain with an iron ball attached to the end and it go whang and it hurt inside.
Okay. Now we're going to cut, and in just a second we'll have you stand up and show us some Kung Fu and some movements in Kung Fu.
Okay.
Cut.
Test X2, take one, speed.
Now look directly into the camera, Bruce. Directly at it. And now give me a 3/4 this way. And hold it. And give me a profile that way, all the way. Good, hold it. Now come back to a profile on the other side. And hold that. Give me a 3/4 on that side. And then give me right into the camera again. All right, now the camera will pull back, and
we find ourselves
first
matched
show me
against
the
a worthy foe.
movements in the classical
Your
Chinese
strength
theater.
would be a great comfort.
Classical Chinese
Well,
theater.
you know what we talked about in the office, how they walk and how they start to move.
Well, in Chinese opera, they have the warrior and then the scholar. The way the warrior walk will be something like this. Walking this way, straight, come out, bend, straight, and then walk out again. An ordinary scholar would be just like a female, a weakling, 90 pounds in child Alice. You'll be just walking, like a girl, real, shoulder up and everything.
So by the way they walk, you can immediately tell who they are.
Right, what character they represent.
Now, show us some Kung Fu movements.
Well, it is hard to show it alone, but I will try to do my best.
All right, maybe one of the fellows will walk in. You want to walk
Yeah,
in?
it would be...
Go ahead. Go ahead. Come on, lady.
Okay.
There you go.
Although accidents do happen, but there are various kind of strike. It depends on where you hit and what weapon you will be using. To the eyes, you would use fingers. Don't worry. To the eyes. Or straight at the face, from the waist, everything on.
Hold it just a minute. Let's move this gentleman around this way so you're doing it more into the camera. Okay, swell.
And then there is band arm strike, using the waist again into a back fist.
And let's have the assistant director back up just a way. Okay, go ahead. Continue.
And then, of course, Kung Fu is very sneaky. You know, the Chinese, they always hit low. From high, go back to the groin.
Now turn around the other way with you, Bruce.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And,
Would you want him to?
yes.
These are just natural reactions. Right. That is natural.
Right into the camera. Cheat into the camera a little bit and show this again.
All right.
Go ahead.
There is the finger jab. There is the punch. There is the back fist and then low. Of course, then they use leg straight at the groin or come up. Or, if I can back up a little bit, they start back from here and then come back.
All right.
It's kind of worried.
He has nothing to worry about. Now, once again, show us how a good Kung Fu man would very coolly handle it and walk away, rather than get involved in a series of actions.
Cut it. Sound.
Okay.
Test X2, take two, speed.
Now, Bruce, so that we can clearly see what you're doing this time, we'll face the fact that there's nobody there. Show me now the difference between Jiu-Jitsu, which is long and involved, and Kung Fu, which is very quick if you have an opponent.
All right, for instance, you will read it in a book, in a magazine and everything, that when somebody grab you, you will first do this, and then this, and then, thousands of steps before you do a single thing. Of course, these kind of magazine would teach you to be feared by your enemies and admired by your friends and everything. But in Kung Fu, it always involves a very fast motion. Like, for instance, a guy grabbing your hand. It's not the idea to do so many steps. Step him right on the instep. He'll let go. This is what we mean by simplicity. Same thing in striking and in everything. It has to be based on a very minimum motion so that everything would be directly expressed. One motion, and he's gone. Doing it gracefully, not to go yelling and jumping all over him, but to do it. Excuse me.
Okay, now show me once again just a few movements there.
Well, Kung Fu can be practiced alone or with a partner. Practicing alone, they involve forms. Some imitate a crane, a monkey, a praying mantis. This is a crane form. Start off. is one of the movement involved. Okay, I'm glad to hear that. They have the tiger that start like a tiger, using claw to claw the face, or the beak of the crane to the eyes move. This is some of the movement involved.
Greetings. We are civilized folk, so you may...
It is the 14th of October, 1066.
I consent.
An Anglo-Saxon army, made up of a small number of professional troops and men from the local shires, gathered on a gentle sloping ridge under the banner of King Harold Godwinson to protect the kingdom against the Norman invaders. The invading host was a well-equipped, highly trained amalgam of Norman knights, archers and infantry, led by the formidable Duke William of Normandy, who came to stake his claim to the crown of England. On the fields and slopes of Senlac Hill, near the town of Hastings, history is about to be made. I'm pleased to say that for this video we partnered up with Field of Glory 2, Medieval. This is a deep, historically accurate and expertly researched turn-based tactical game set in the High Middle Ages from 1040 AD to 1270 AD. I'm having an absolute blast playing it. Take control of the battle and lead your chosen army with its named generals to victory. Draw your forces from historically accurate orders of battle that allow all of the tactical options and variations that a real general of that nation from the era would have had. Relive historical scenarios covering key engagements of the period on an epic scale. This includes legendary battles of the period such as Hastings, Lake Peipus, Bouvines, and many more. Choose from set-piece historical battles, or what-if custom battle situations, or even create your own battles with the random map generator. You can produce an infinite variety of historically realistic battlefield maps for custom battles that can be played against the AI or human opponents. Click the link below to visit their Steam page, and if you decide to buy the game, you'll also be helping the channel a little bit. For anyone enjoying historically accurate tactical strategies, Field of Glory 2 Medieval is a game you shouldn't miss. It is the late 9th century. Having already pillaged and wrought terror upon numerous settlements across the North Sea, Viking raiders appeared on the shores of Francia. Despite his best efforts, King Charles the Simple could not check the growing Norse power, and after the devastating siege of Chartres in 911, he was forced to cede a swathe of northern territory to Rollo, the leader of the Norse raiding parties, giving him rights for his people to intermarry with the Frankish locals and make the land their home. This paved the way for the Duchy of Normandy, and with Duke Rollo as its founder, established a dynasty that would leave a lasting legacy on Western Europe. 4 successors later, Robert I inherited control of the duchy amidst a civil war that caused much instability. But despite troubles at home, he intervened in the civil war in Flanders, meddled in the affairs of the French crown, led a military campaign against his rebellious vassal, the Duchy of Brittany, and, at best, had a rocky relationship with the church. Faced with excommunication, Robert attempted reconciliation by restoring church property that he and his vassals seized, and set off on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, leaving the duchy in the hands of his illegitimate 8-year-old son, William. Across the Channel, Edward of Wessex, Duke Robert's cousin, inherited the throne of England from his half-brother, Harthacnut. Their mother, Queen Emma of Normandy, who was first married to Ethelred the Unready, and then to Canute the Great, used her significant political clout to coordinate the transfer of power between her sons. With Edward's accession, the House of Wessex was restored to the throne, ending the decades-long rule of the Danish Yelling dynasty in England that was established after Canute the Great's decisive victory at the Battle of Assundoun. From early on in his reign, Edward drew advisors, nobles and priests from his and his mother's Normanno-French circles to build his own power base. He further solidified his position by marrying Edith, daughter of the most powerful earl in England, Godwin of Wessex. But Godwin opposed the rise of Norman influence in the Anglo-Saxon royal court, and years of political infighting followed, testing the power of the two men. Edward finally managed to negotiate the backing of Earls of Mercia and Northumbria to exile Godwin along with his wife and sons in September 1051. Knowing that the powerful Earl would return, the childless King of England used his lack of an heir as political leverage by naming a distant relative, Duke William of Normandy, as his successor, further solidifying his ties with the Norman aristocracy. Just months later, Godwin returned with an army and quickly gained support of the navy, burghers, and the peasants. This compelled Edward to restore his earldom, but Godwin refrained from openly opposing the naming of a Norman aristocrat as heir to the throne, aware that the king was backed by Earls of Northumbria, Mercia, and could possibly count on the support of the Duke of Normandy as well. Having inherited the duchy as an 8-year-old illegitimate son of a duke, William and his supporters struggled to consolidate their control over Normandy. Prominent members of the aristocracy vied to place themselves in power, or at least bend the child duke's arm to increase their own influence. It took William a number of years to secure his rule, but the prolonged fight for his position turned him into a shrewd politician and a tenacious military leader. By the time he was in his 30s, he exacted either direct or indirect control over most of the northern coast of France. Back in England, Godwin died suddenly. His son Harold succeeded him as Earl of Wessex, while his other sons gained control over several major earldoms, in effect bringing most of England under the control of the Godwins. Meanwhile, the aging and increasingly ill King Edward withdrew from the affairs of the state, becoming increasingly dependent on the Godwins. He gradually deteriorated before falling into a coma, dying just days later in early January 1066. Unsurprisingly, in the wake of the king's death, prominent nobles were not far, ready to joust for position on the vacant throne. According to some of those present, before drawing his last breath, Edward briefly regained consciousness and pointed a finger at someone in the room. Conveniently, the Godwin-dominated royal court interpreted this to be Harold, chosen to protect the kingdom. The powerful Earl seized the moment, crowning himself King of England the very next day. When the news reached Normandy, William was outraged, claiming his right to the English crown. Almost immediately, he began preparations to take the throne by force, ordering the building of a large fleet that could transport his army across the Channel, and moving to rally political support for his invasion. Many nobles of Normandy answered the call, and more banners came from Flanders, Brittany, and France after being promised vast wealth, land, and political positions in England. But, unfortunately for the shaky rule of Harold Godwinson, William wasn't the only contender for the throne. Prior to his death, Edward named yet another successor, Edward the Exile, who had spent the last 40 years in Hungary and had returned from banishment in 1057 with a family of his own. but had died shortly afterwards. However, his son Edgar Etheling inherited his father's claim, but lacked any significant support to take the crown of England. Complicating matters further for Harold, his brother Tostig fell out of favour for overtaxing the inhabitants of Northumbria, leaving the king with no choice but to revoke his earldom. Plotting vengeance, Tostig contacted the King of Norway, Harald Hardrada, persuading him to invade England. Harold was yet another pretendant, having inherited the claim to the English throne from Magnus, the former King of Norway and Denmark, who had made an agreement with the late King Harthacnut of England that if either died, the other would inherit their lands. Despite his claim, however, the Norwegian king was under no illusion that he would have to fight to take the throne. Back across the Channel, William was ready after months of preparation, but unfavorable north winds kept the ships anchored in Normandy. Regardless, the Duke was in no hurry, as intelligence reports revealed that Harold deployed his forces along the coast, so he decided to bide his time until he could make an unopposed landing. Indeed, the King of England kept his troops on high alert throughout the summer, ready to contest the Norman invasion. But supply shortages and the arrival of the harvest season forced him to disband much of his army in early September. Just as he returned to London, more bad news came for Harold. Aided by Tostig, Harald Hardrada invaded Northumbria and defeated a much smaller force led by the newly appointed Earl Morcar. Once news reached Harold that a 10,000-strong Viking force had landed in the north, he rushed to meet them. In barely a few days, he scrambled a resistance force, marching all the way from London to York in under 4 days. On September the 25th, Godwinson's force pulled off a heroic victory against Hardrada's invasion force at Stamford Bridge. It was a glorious day for the King of England, but the sweet taste of victory was short-felt. Receiving news that the Normans had landed in the south, celebrations were cut short as Harold had to turn back to rescue his throne. Aware that the King of England was busy in the north, Duke William took his time to set up a strong position, aware that resupplying his army would be difficult in case of a long campaign. He captured Pevensey, then advanced on Hastings further up the coast. Both towns were fortified, from where he could now raid the surrounding area. To the east, a few ships were blown off course, landing at Romney, where the Normans fought the local Fyrd. By early October, Harold reached London after a grueling forced march, his troops still exhausted from the battle at Stamford Bridge that took place just a few days ago. The army encamped near the capital for a week, preparing their equipment for the upcoming engagement and attempting to catch up on some much-needed rest. He probably could have waited to assemble a larger army, but as soon as his troops were sufficiently ready, Godwinson eagerly marched to meet the Normans, confident after his recent stunning victory. He wanted to use the element of surprise, just as he had against Hardrada's invasion force in the north. But as the Anglo-Saxon army closed in, Norman scouts spotted their movement. With William now marching to meet him, Harold chose the ground suitable for his army, some 10 kilometers northwest of Hastings, where he waited for William. Harold's army was comprised almost entirely of infantry. Lacking mobility, he took up a defensive position on the Senlac Hill, atop of a south-sloping plateau, with dense woodland and swamps protecting his flanks and rear. Professional contingents of housecarls formed in the center, though their ranks were fairly depleted after the bloody encounter just 2 weeks ago. The rest of the troops were the highly motivated but poorly trained furred peasant militia mobilized just days prior from the local shires. In contrast, the invading host was a well-equipped, generally high-trained amalgam of Norman knights, archers and infantry in the centre, with Franco-Flemish and Brittonic infantry and cavalry on the flanks. The Duke's army was fairly experienced, well-organised, and eager to fight. In the early hours of the morning, William sent forth his archers, planning to weaken the tight Anglo-Saxon formation. But Harold packed his men in a tight formation, knowing that sticking together and taking a strong defensive stance was their best bet at a victory. The arrow volleys shot uphill and were largely ineffective, directly hitting the shield wall at a flat angle. Most of the arrow fire was absorbed by the Anglo-Saxon shields. Nonetheless, the Duke ordered his infantry to pass through the archers and head up the slope to test Harold's line. He counted on his footmen to provide the main fighting grunt of the battle, but despite their best efforts, they were unable to open gaps in the solid shield wall. William then led his knights up the slope, hoping their shock charge would punch through the embattled enemy infantry. But the shield wall held. By midday, the combined push of heavy infantry and mounted knights failed to break the resolve of the defenders. Norman cavalry struggled to fight against Harold's men, who were swift to cut down the horses with their axes. They were forced to fall back and regroup for another charge, but the Bretons on the left mistook this maneuver for a rout and began to flee. Some in the Anglo-Saxon line broke formation, leaving the solid shield wall to pursue the enemy. Seeing the rout on his left, William ordered the rest of his troops to disengage and withdraw back down the slope. It was reported that the Duke had 2 horses slain under him during the chaotic fighting, fueling a rumor that he was struck down, which added to the confusion. To prevent a complete rout, William removed his helmet and rode through the ranks in full view of his troops, yelling at the men that he is alive. He then commanded a contingent of Norman knights to strike the flank of the pursuing Third Militia and managed to rally some of the fleeing troops on the left. As the reformed infantry faced about and the knights closed in, the Anglo-Saxons were forced onto a small hillock where they were surrounded and destroyed. Wanting to seize the moment, now that Godwinson's line had thinned out after heavy fighting, William launched a general assault, personally leading the charge. Archers again shot uphill at the shield wall, but just like the last time, their arrows bounced off the tightly packed shields of the defenders. The advancing Norman infantry, followed by the mounted knights, were met with a barrage of spears, axes, and stones before locking weapons with the Anglo-Saxons. Unable to force openings in the shield wall, once again the attack failed, and the Normans retreated back off the ridge. A break in the fighting probably occurred early in the afternoon, as both armies needed rest and food. With losses mounting for the Normans, it seemed that Harold's plan was working. Seeing the futility of the attacks against the solid Anglo-Saxon line, William revised his strategy, this time sending only his knights forward. Looking to recreate the accidental success on the left flank that drew out some of the Anglo-Saxon infantry earlier in the day, the knights were tasked with charging Harold's line at various points and then retreating back to try and lure the defenders into giving chase down the slope. The Normans engaged the defenders in a brief skirmish before pulling back. However, the feigned retreat failed to draw out the enemy, but the brief clash further thinned out the ranks of the formidable housecarls in the shield wall, who were replaced by furred units. With archers in support, the knights charged again, now with more conviction, exchanging blows with the Anglo-Saxons for much of the afternoon. Then they broke and retreated in disarray. Some of the defenders left the shield wall in pursuit of the fleeing Normans. It is not known whether Harold wanted to give chase or if it was spontaneous, though it is likely that the king ordered the troops to hold the line, but failed to control some of the men. And this time, the feigned retreat worked. William's knights wheeled about to face the incoming infantry. During the pursuit, the Anglo-Saxons lost cohesion and were now caught in the open without the protection of the shield wall. Spending much of their energy charging down the slope, the footmen stood no chance against the mounted Norman knights and were quickly overrun. Having dismantled part of the shield wall, the rest of William's army struggled up the hill, bearing down on Harold's remaining units. With a renewed fervor on the invading side, the Duke's infantry and cavalry struck the Anglo-Saxon line. Unable to fight effectively against the better-armed Normans and French, the Anglo-Saxon units rapidly crumbled, with their forces breaking apart and being surrounded by the invading parties. It was at this chaotic time that legend has it Harold was tragically shot in the eye, according to some by friendly fire. He was subsequently toppled from his horse and brutally hacked to pieces by several Norman knights. The death of their king was a horrendous morale blow to the Anglo-Saxons, who began to flee the field, chased down by Norman soldiers. And so it was, the historic Battle of Hastings fell to a decisive victory for the invading Norman forces, and a tragic defeat for the Anglo-Saxons, who lost their king, a man who would ultimately become immortalized not only on the Bayeux Tapestry, but in history itself.